Too many Woody Guthrie's songs were the spirit of working-class America, but to the FBI, they were dangerous, and declassified documents reveal the chilling truth. Woodrow Wilson Guthrie was born July 14, 1912, in Oklahoma. His parents, Charlie and Nora, named the child after presidential candidate Woodrow Wilson, while the name reflected mainstream Democratic Party politics. Guthrie's father's political activities would soon take a sinister turn, while Charlie Guthrie was a successful land developer by day. He was a member of the Ku Klux Klan by night, joining the organization in 1915, with Jim Crow laws in force in Oklahoma, and the Klan terrorizing the area's black people. The young Woody Guthrie was a witness to the prejudice of his surroundings. When Woody was 7, his older sister Clara set her own clothes on fire during a fight with their mother. Lying on her bed, the horribly burned older girl told Guthrie not to cry, that she would be fine, but she was too far gone. The young Woody Guthrie was devastated at the loss of his sister. Meanwhile, the family's financial fortunes were in a steep decline. Guthrie's father had already lost most of the family's wealth in a string of bad real estate deals. Hemorrhaging money by the day and himself badly burned in yet another fire, Charlie went to recuperate with relatives in the Texas panhandle town of Pampa, leaving Guthrie and his older brother Roy with their mother. While the two teenage boys ran wild, their mother went straight over the edge into abyss. Guthrie's mother, Nora, had shown signs of mental illness for years. The loss of her daughter only made things worse. Her erratic behavior and loss of muscle control led her to being committed to a psychiatric hospital when Guthrie was 14. Her symptoms are now known as Huntington's disease, but all anyone understood at the time was that she'd lost her mind. With their father in Texas and their mother institutionalized, Guthrie and his older brother were on their own. Left to his own devices, Guthrie hitchhiked around the area doing odd jobs. He befriended a shoeshine boy named George, who played blues on the harmonica. Guthrie was soon hooked on the instrument and scraped together enough money to buy one for himself. The harmonica's soulful sounds provided a welcome relief from worries about his uncertain future. Though known as a bright student, Woody Guthrie was more interested in his own self-directed reading. Guthrie quit school a year before graduation. Hoping a change in scenery would change his luck, he headed to Pampa to live with his father. At this time, the worst depression of all time was settling in across the United States, and with the oil industry tanking, Texas was no exception. Sinking low from Charlie's bad land deals, the Guthries were one more family whose livelihood began to unravel. As the economy came unglued, even worse news hit. Guthrie got news that his mother's worsening symptoms had finally claimed her life. The realization that she'd never emerged from the psychiatric institution and of how the community had stigmatized her would haunt Guthrie for the rest of his life. In the meantime, he followed on a promising new path. Woody's uncle, Jeff Guthrie, was a skilled musician who'd even won fiddling contests. He taught Guthrie how to play the guitar, mandolin, fiddle, and banjo. The two played gigs together at barn dances around the area. However, knowing Jeff's abilities far outshone his, Woody looked for more suitable musical partners. Guthrie formed his first band with Matt Jennings and Cluster Baker, the Corn Cob Trio, and while he thought his new bandmates were pretty good, Guthrie really had his eye on Jennings' younger sister, Mary. Woody Guthrie fell in love with Mary Jennings and married her in 1933. From a stable family, Mary was considered a catch in the local community. The couple would have 3 kids in the next few years, Gwendolyn, Sue, and Bill. Unfortunately, Woody himself had never been stable, and any chance of having a normal family life was about to be swept away. It rose in clouds miles across, sifted under doorways, caused a pneumonia, and blacked out the sun. The Dust Bowl had arrived in Pampa. Years of drought and poor farming practices meant that the topsoil simply disintegrated and blew away. With their property engulfed by suffocating wind-blown dust and the family in desperate straits, Guthrie headed west to find work. Following a tide of humanity westward, Guthrie hitchhiked along Route 66, playing music in saloons, working as a sign painter, and doing any odd jobs he could find. Without money or a roof over his head during much of this time, Guthrie wondered if he could get to California before reaching the end of his rope, but the hard times were also a source of inspiration. Using the catastrophe of the Dust Bowl as his subject matter, Guthrie started writing his own songs. Some of the songs were sad, some were humorous, but they all radiated goodwill towards those who had left their homes behind for a new life in California. Unfortunately, California wasn't exactly the paradise Guthrie had hoped for. Guthrie's arrival in California hardly improved his situation. The local authorities were hostile to the encampments of Oaks, who were people fleeing Oklahoma and other Midwestern states. While traveling around the state, Guthrie continued to perform his songs and share in the people's daily hardships. The situation he saw only hardened his evolving political views. By the time he arrived in California, Guthrie had seen several tragedies. His mother shamed for her illness, mistreatment, and violence toward black people, people foreclosed out of their homes, and hostility toward the migrant workers around him. He had read Marxist theory, but what infuriated him was the sight of disadvantaged people being kicked around when they were down, and he had no trouble finding others who shared his views. Despite his strong left-wing and communist views, Guthrie never formally joined the Communist Party. Guarding his independence like a stubborn mule, it was too individualistic to join such an organization. Guthrie was more than happy to sing in its support, however, and he would soon share his views on a bigger platform. Playing the migrant camps and music halls of the L.A. area eventually brought Guthrie to the attention of a local radio DJ who hired him to co-host his show. Woody's gift for music went hand in hand with his gift for gab. Both were valuable qualities of a radio host. Guthrie's success on the airwaves enabled him to pay for his family to move to California and join him. The outspoken Guthrie soon had a chance to put his views in print as well. Guthrie started writing an unpaid column for the People's Weekly, a Marxist newspaper. As the Depression ground on, he wasn't shy about expressing where the fault lay for the country's problems. Talented at drawing, Guthrie often added a cartoon just to drive the point home with a touch of humor. But even with all these pursuits, Guthrie still found time for his songwriting. Guthrie's newest song, Pretty Boy Floyd, romanticized the legendary bank robber as a hero to the poor, while also asking if banks foreclosing people's homes wasn't another form of robbery. While the sentiment wasn't uncommon at the time, it was Guthrie's most outspoken song yet. For exclusive perks, like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factor Nape member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. Being a communist in the 1930s meant supporting the Soviet Union, the signings of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, and the outbreak of World War II brought Guthrie's communist views into the crosshairs of the radio station's owners. Wanting to avoid government scrutiny of Guthrie's commentary, the station let him go. His firing left the family broke, and they had no choice but to return to Texas. His wife, Mary, understandably upset, told him that he shouldn't have brought politics into his radio show in the first place. His leftist views made him almost unemployable in the current climate, and gloomily the family headed home. The Guthries rode a 1929 Chevrolet sedan about 1,700 miles home along Route 66. They arrived in Pampa just in time for Christmas 1939, but the mood was hardly festive. Guthrie had no job prospects in the small Texas town, but the thing was, even if he'd had a job to line up, he didn't really want to stay. Feeling like he'd taken a step back in his newfound career, he mauled his options. Then one day later, a letter arrived for him from the actor Will Geer, who Guthrie had befriended during his time in California. Will invited Guthrie to come to New York and explore the music and acting opportunities there, with a standing offer to stay with Will, and already restless to hit the road again. Guthrie packed up his six-string and started hitchhiking his way northeast. The close-knit community of New York folk musicians and politically active writers had built up the image of Guthrie in their minds as a strapping Wild West figure. They called him the Oklahoma Cowboy, but soon realized that despite his down-home accent, Guthrie was extremely well-read and very intelligent. Not only had Guthrie caused a stir in the local music scene, word of its arrival had gotten around to record companies. Victor Records signed Guthrie to cut an album. This album would end up being his only major label release. Consisting entirely of songs he'd written on the road to California, it was an early concept album. And once he finished with the recording, Guthrie focused on writing even more songs. What he played at a benefit concert in New York to aid migrant farm workers, there he met Pete Seeger, an accomplished folk singer with many of the same views he had. The two struck up a friendship and would frequently jam and perform together in the years ahead. With summer on the way, the two already agreed that it was the perfect time to head on tour. Guthrie and Seeger traveled the South, playing saloons and homeless camps along the way. The pair visited Guthrie's wife and kids in Pampa, Texas. Himself, from an upper-middle-class family, Seeger was shocked at the sight of the Guthrie home, which wasn't much more than a shack. He had wanted to sing about the lives with the downtrodden, and when he was with Guthrie, he wouldn't live their lives too. However, Guthrie was about to come into some money. Having had several guest spots on radio shows, Guthrie was offered a job hosting a weekly radio show of his own called Pipe Smoking Time. With a salary of $180 per week, Guthrie could afford to rent a nice apartment in Manhattan. He was also able to pay to have his wife and kids join him in New York. Meanwhile, his radio work led to a collaboration with another great folk artist. In the course of one of his many radio appearances, Guthrie secured a guest spot for the folk blues performer Huddie Ledbetter, a.k.a. Lead Belly. While this helped Lead Belly gain a wider audience, it also led to a friendship and many future collaborations between the two artists. In the meantime, however, Guthrie was already growing tired of his radio hosting gig. While his job as host of Pipe Smoking Time paid well, the show's managers limited what Guthrie could say on air. Frustrated with the censorship, he got a job as a narrator and songwriter for a documentary on a hydroelectric dam project in Oregon. Guthrie and his family headed out west and spent a month on location. But as he returned to New York, Mary told Woody he'd be on his own. The long periods of separation from Woody had put a strain on his family. His constant traveling and career changes made staying together with him even harder. Over the years, Mary had shouldered as much hardship as Guthrie had. If not more, she told Woody she was leaving him and going back to Texas with the kids. The divorce would go through in 1943. Meanwhile, Woody jumped on board a new project. Back in New York, Guthrie joined Pete Seeger's new group, the Almanac Singers. The group was part of an effort to spread a pro-union, anti-war, and anti-racist message. They performed regularly at union rallies and once gave a concert at Madison Square Garden for 20,000 striking transit workers. But the express train of Guthrie's politics was about to switch tracks. The news of Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union caused an instant 180-degree reversal in the Communist Party's stance on the conflict. Guthrie and other leftist performers followed suit, whereas before they had always urged the United States to stay out of World War II, they now sang songs about the need to beat the fascists. While he continued to eye the political situation, Woody focused on a new idea. Music writer and researcher Alan Lomax now encouraged Guthrie to write his autobiography. Guthrie had always been a prolific writer, and he had enough experiences to fill several lifetimes by the time he finished writing Bound for Glory. He also had a new lady in his life. Marjorie was a dance instructor who met Guthrie through a mutual friend. Like many New Yorkers, Marjorie had always envisioned Guthrie as a tall cowboy in a Stetson hat. Although she was surprised to see that the weather-beaten Guthrie was only 5 feet and 6 inches tall, it wasn't long before he swept her off her feet. They were made for each other, and she soon brought him wonderful news. Marjorie was pregnant with Woody's child, which posed a problem for the pair since they were both still legally married to weather people. Their daughter, Kathy Ann Guthrie, was born in 1943. With this new joy in his life, Guthrie dusted off some old lyric sheets and found his way back to the recording studio. Guthrie had met Moses Asher, the manager of Folkway Records. Knowing the value of Guthrie's work, Moses was determined to record as many of his songs as possible. One of the first songs Guthrie cut was his old 1940 composition, This Land Is Your Land. Guthrie would record hundreds of other songs for Folkways, but Guthrie was faced with another challenge. Seeking to avoid Army service, Guthrie signed up for the U.S. Merchant Marine, serving on board transport ships as a dishwasher in the mess hall. Guthrie also sang songs for the crew to break the monotony of long-sleeve voyages. However, unhappy with Woody's communist politics, the U.S. government hadn't transferred to the Army. Serving in the New York area for the remainder of World War II, Private Guthrie managed to stay out of trouble. With the conflict finally over, Guthrie had every reason to be helpful about his future. While on furlough from the Army, Woody had married Marjorie. With their daughter, Kathy Ann, already 2 years old, Marjorie had moved into an apartment on Mermaid Avenue on Coney Island, where Woody would join them in their new house. The rambling man had finally decided to settle down. It didn't take Woody long to move into their Mermaid Avenue home. Aside from his guitar and typewriter, his belongings barely filled one clothing drawer. Guthrie spent most of his time writing songs for Kathy Ann and taking care of her, while Marjorie gave lessons at her thriving dance studio. But this peace wouldn't last. The fire was later blamed on a short circuit in the wiring of a radio. By the time neighbors arrived to help, it was already too late to rescue Kathy Ann from the flames that engulfed her bed. Kathy Ann Guthrie wouldn't make it. She was just 4 years old. The devastated couple tried to find a new way to push forward. Woody and Marjorie had 3 more kids from 1947 to 1950, Arlo, Jody, and Nora. Guthrie also kept himself busy writing and recording. His output in these years included stories, poetry, and hundreds of songs. He was also a popular guest performer for benefit concerts. As the decade of the 1940s wound down, Woody had a pleasant surprise. Woody discovered that he had many fans in the younger generation. One of these was Ramblin' Jack Elliott, who not only idolized Guthrie, but was determined to learn his guitar playing and performing styles. Staying with the Guthries for weeks, Elliott mastered the Guthrie sound and would help influence many other folk musicians down the line. Now, Guthrie had always been a nonconformist, but his family could tell something was terribly wrong. He began to have trouble concentrating on what he was doing, flew off the handle easily, and said things that made no sense at all. While his friends and family wondered what was going on, doctors took a closer look. Doctors tried to nail down the cause of Guthrie's increasingly erratic behavior. Alcoholism and schizophrenia were ruled out when Guthrie made a couple of brief stints in New York psychiatrist hospitals. It was during his stay at Brooklyn State Hospital that Guthrie and his family at last got some answers. Doctors finally diagnosed Guthrie with Huntington's disease, the same degenerative disorder that claimed the life of his mother decades earlier. The whole thing made sense now. But knowing all too well the symptoms that were to ensue, Guthrie struggled to accept the grim news. Longing to escape the confines of institutions, Guthrie began to take hitchhiking trips around the country. But Woody's love for life on the road, along with the degenerative effects of his illness, made it impossible for him to be a proper husband and father. And Marjorie asked for a separation. and so Woody headed out to greener pastures in California. Guthrie went to stay with an old friend, actor Will Geer. After being blacklisted in Hollywood's first leftist views, Will had sold his home and bought some land in rural California. The property was a haven for blacklisted actors trying to lay low during the anti-communist hysteria of the 1950s. Guthrie lived in a small shack on the property, but even there he attracted unwelcome scrutiny. The FBI had long kept a file on Guthrie amid the anti-communist uproar in the country. They took another look at the radical folk musician, finding that Woody had never joined the Communist Party. And seeing his declining health, the Bureau decided not to investigate him further. But that doesn't mean that he was squeaky clean. More on that later. Unaware that the agency was snooping around, Guthrie found love again. Guthrie had met a 20-year-old art student named Aniki Van Kirk during his time staying at Geer's California refuge. The two quickly evolved from fellow political misfits to lovers. Van Kirk left her husband to be with Woody. With Woody convinced that they needed a fresh start together, the pair hit the road. With Van Kirk now expecting their baby, the couple looked for a more stable situation. Guthrie and Van Kirk moved back to New York City in January 1954, stopping along the way to get married. Aniki gave birth to the couple's first child, Lorena. Later that year, Guthrie fought hard to maintain his independence and creativity long past the point when others would have called it quits. But Huntington's disease tightened its merciless grip on him. Increasingly volatile, he was lashing out at those around him. Unable to deny the terrible truth any longer, Woody checked himself back into Brooklyn State Hospital. Guthrie finally lost his struggle with Huntington's on October 3, 1967. The hereditary disease would also claim the lives of his two daughters from his first marriage, Gwendolyn and Sue. Now remember how the FBI had been keeping tabs on Woody? Well, even though they never pursued a case against him, they did find that he kept some questionable company. Woody Guthrie was friends with George Haggerty and Ramon Durham, two members of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. The Lincoln Brigade was a group of Americans who fought during the Spanish Civil War against fascist Francisco Franco. According to the FBI, the two veterans had turned from their patriotic duty in favor of communism, and these two vets were planning to help the Soviet Union if war broke out between the United States and the USSR. Luckily for Woody Guthrie, he didn't have any part in those plans, and he happened to be so sickly that the Bureau decided he wasn't a threat. If you enjoyed this Factor Nate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.